Picture a teenager being dragged in chains from the only home he's ever known. His city is burning behind him. His friends are dead. The journey takes months, dust, hunger, the shuffle of thousands of other captives. They take his Hebrew name, Daniel, which means God is my judge, and replace it with Belteshazzar, which means Bel, protect the king. They're trying to erase his story, replace his God. But here's the thing about trying to rewrite someone's identity. If their author is still writing, you're just adding conflict to a chapter you'll never control. Let me show you what I mean. Tonight, I want to read you every word of the book of Daniel. Not because it's ancient history, but because it might be the most relevant story for whatever's keeping you awake right now. You see, you clicked on this video because somewhere inside, there's a question you can't silence. What if I'm not in control? What if I never was? And that thought either terrifies you, or if you're really honest, it secretly relieves you. Here's what I know about you tonight. You've been taught that faith means having a clear vision for your life, a detailed plan, unshakable confidence. So when your plans shatter, when doors slam shut, when you're lying awake at 2 a.m. with anxiety clawing at your chest, you think you've failed at faith itself. You believe God's silence means you've wandered off script. You've been trying so hard to be the author of your own story that you're exhausted from holding the pen. Your fingers are cramping from gripping so tightly. Your mind is racing because you're trying to write the next chapter, the next paragraph, the next sentence, and you have no idea what comes next. But what if I told you that the same God who showed Daniel the rise and fall of empires spanning centuries never told Daniel the day he'd return home? Daniel died in Babylon. He never saw Jerusalem again. And yet he's remembered not as the man who got his desired ending, but as the man who remained faithful inside the story he didn't write. He's remembered not for getting what he wanted, but for trusting who was writing. Most sermons tell you to surrender control as if it's a choice you're currently withholding, as if you're clutching control in your fists and God is politely asking you to open your hands. Tonight we're going to do something different. We're going to read the raw, unedited story of a man who had control ripped away and discovered that God writes better stories when our hands are off the pen. Not as punishment, but as grace. Not as abandonment, but as authorship. By the end of our time together, you won't just hear comfort. You'll encounter a God who predicted the future while his prophet couldn't predict his own tomorrow. You'll realize that if he held the trajectory of empires while Daniel was in exile, he's holding your story while you're in the dark. If he knew what would happen 400 years after Daniel died, he knows what's going to happen to you tomorrow morning, and the day after that, and every day after that. So let me ask you to do something. Take a breath, a real one, not the shallow panic breathing you've been doing. Let your shoulders drop, feel them release. You don't have to figure anything out tonight. You don't have to solve the problems that are keeping you awake. You don't have to come up with a plan. You don't have to see the path forward. You just have to listen. Let me read you this story, and let's see together what happens when someone discovers that being out of control isn't the crisis, it's the invitation. Let's begin where Daniel's story begins. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he carried them into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Now let me pause here, because this opening line is easy to miss, but it changes everything. The Lord gave Jehoiakim into his hand. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't God losing control. This wasn't God looking away for a moment and Babylon sneaking in and stealing his people. This was God using the worst thing that could happen, the destruction of Jerusalem, the exile of his people, the desecration of his temple, as the opening chapter of a story that would outlast empires. Think about this. If you were writing Israel's story, would you write this chapter? Would you allow the temple to be ransacked, the holy vessels carried off to a pagan temple, God's people enslaved? But God writes different stories than we would write. He writes resurrection stories, and resurrection requires death first. He writes redemption stories, and redemption requires a fall first. He writes deliverance stories, and deliverance requires captivity first. Imagine you're Daniel. You're maybe 15, 16 years old. You've grown up in Jerusalem, the city of God. You've been taught since you could walk that God's presence dwells in the temple, that Jerusalem is untouchable, that if you follow God, you'll be blessed, protected, safe. Your parents probably quoted Psalm 46 to you. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way. You believed that. You staked your life on it. And then one morning you wake up to screaming. Smoke. The sound of battering rams against walls you thought would never fall. You hear your mother crying. You see your father trying to protect the family. But it's not enough. By midday, the Babylonian soldiers are in your home. By evening, your parents are gone. Maybe dead. Maybe taken somewhere else. You'll never know. Your home is ash. The temple you were taught was indestructible is burning, and you're being chained to thousands of others for a forced march that will take months. Every step away from Jerusalem is a step away from everything you believed. Every night you try to sleep on hard ground, surrounded by the sounds of weeping, and you wonder, where is God? Did I do something wrong? Did my family do something wrong? Did I sin somehow and this is punishment? Is God angry with me? Has he forgotten his promises? Does he even see me anymore? The march is brutal. People die along the way. Old people who can't keep up. Young children who get sick. You watch them fall and no one stops. The chain keeps moving. You're just a number now. Just cargo. Just another slave being transported to build someone else's empire. Your identity is being stripped away mile by mile, day by day. But here's what the text says. The Lord gave them into his hand. This wasn't abandonment. This was authorship. God was writing a story that Daniel couldn't see yet, a story that would require him to be in Babylon, not Jerusalem. A story that would require him to lose everything familiar so he could discover that God isn't confined to a temple or a city or a homeland. God goes with his people into exile. God meets them in the worst chapters of their stories. And sometimes, often actually, God's best stories start with the worst chapters. Think about it. If Daniel had stayed in Jerusalem, comfortable and safe, he would have been just another young man living a predictable life. But because he was taken to Babylon, he became the man who stood before kings, the man who interpreted dreams, the man who survived a furnace and a lion's den, the man whose prophecies are still being studied 3,000 years later. The worst thing that happened to him became the doorway to the most significant life he could have lived. Let me keep reading. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. So Nebuchadnezzar isn't just enslaving these young men. He's trying to reprogram them. This is systematic cultural assimilation. He takes the brightest, the best, the ones with the most potential, and he puts them through an indoctrination program. Learn our language, eat our food, study our literature, worship our gods, adopt our customs, forget your God, forget your people, forget who you were, become Babylonian, This was a common practice in ancient empires. You take the children of the conquered people and you reprogram them. In a generation, they'll be working for you instead of against you. They'll forget their own culture and embrace yours. It's brilliant, actually, from a strategic standpoint. And it usually worked. And here's where we meet Daniel. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, of the tribe of Judah, and the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. Let me tell you what those names meant, because this is so important. Daniel means God is my judge. Every time someone said his name, it was a declaration of faith. It was a reminder that he answered to God, not to kings or empires. His name was his identity, a constant reminder of who he belonged to. So what does Babylon do? They rename him Belteshazzar, which means Bel protect the king. Bel was a Babylonian god, a false god. They're literally trying to overwrite his identity with a name that prays to a demon. Every time someone calls him Belteshazzar, they're declaring allegiance to a false god. That's psychological warfare. Hananiah means Yahweh is gracious. It's a name that proclaims God's character. They changed it to Shadrach, which means command of Aku, another pagan deity. Mishael means who is what God is. It's a rhetorical question, declaring God's uniqueness, his incomparability. They changed it to Meshach, meaning who is what Aku is. They took a declaration of God's uniqueness and turned it into a question about a false god. And Azariah, which means Yahweh has helped, became Abednego, servant of Nebo, yet another Babylonian god. 4 Hebrew names that declared the character and power of the true God, replaced with 4 Babylonian names that declared allegiance to false gods. Do you see what they're doing? They're trying to erase these young men's stories, replace their author. If we can just change their names, make them speak a different language, feed them different food, surround them with different gods, saturate them with different values, eventually they'll forget who they were. Eventually they'll become ours. Eventually their children won't even remember Jerusalem. And here's why this matters for you tonight. Maybe you're lying there feeling like life has renamed you. Maybe the voices in your head are calling you names that aren't yours. Failure. Washed up. Too broken to fix. Not enough. Too much. Forgotten. Disqualified. Past your prime. Damaged goods. Second choice. Backup plan. Maybe circumstances have tried to rewrite your identity. The job you lost whispers you're unemployable. The relationship that ended whispers you're unlovable. The diagnosis you received whispers you're damaged. The dream that died whispers you're a failure. The mistake you made whispers you're disqualified. And you're wondering if maybe those names are your real names now. Maybe this exile, this season of loss, this chapter of pain, maybe that's who you really are now. But watch what Daniel does. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. This is revolutionary. This is the turning point. Because here's what Daniel couldn't control. He couldn't control being taken captive. He couldn't control being renamed. He couldn't control the destruction of his city, or the death of his family, or the 3-year indoctrination program he was forced into. He couldn't control what language he had to learn, or what literature he had to study, or what palace he had to serve in. But he could control one thing: what he put in his mouth. It sounds so small. It sounds almost petty. It sounds like missing the big picture. But this was Daniel's way of saying, you can change my name, but you can't change my author. You can control my circumstances, but you can't control my worship. You can determine where I live, but you can't determine who I serve. You can force me to speak your language, but you can't force me to forget mine. You can call me Belteshazzar, but I know my real name. This is what faithfulness looks like in exile. It's not dramatic. It's not flashy. It's not a grand public protest. It's just a quiet decision in a moment where you have a choice. It's choosing vegetables when everyone else is eating the king's delicacies. It's staying true to your convictions when it would be so much easier to compromise. It's maintaining your integrity when no one would even know if you let it slip. And here's the beautiful part. The part that should give you hope tonight. God had already gone ahead of him, and God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. The same phrase, God gave. Just like God gave Jerusalem into Nebuchadnezzar's hand at the beginning of the story, now God gives Daniel favor in the midst of his captivity. Do you see it? God wasn't absent in the destruction. God wasn't absent in the exile. God wasn't looking the other way when Jerusalem fell. God was writing every chapter, even the painful ones, even the ones that looked like defeat, even the ones that felt like abandonment. And now God was positioning Daniel exactly where he needed to be, with exactly the favor he needed to stay faithful. This is the pattern of God's sovereignty. He works in the big moments, the fall of cities, the rise of empires. And he works in the small moments, the favor of one eunuch, the choice of vegetables over wine. Nothing is outside his authorship. Nothing is beyond his reach. He's writing in the macro and the micro, in the global and the personal, in the historical and the individual. The chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. The man is afraid. He's caught between Daniel's request and the king's command. He likes Daniel. He wants to help, but he's afraid of what will happen if Daniel looks weak or sickly compared to the other young men. This is real risk. This isn't just theoretical. If the king notices that Daniel isn't thriving like the others, the chief eunuch could lose his life. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. Daniel proposes a test. Give us 10 days. If we look worse than the others, do what you want. If we look better, let us continue. It's a reasonable request. It's not demanding. It's not self-righteous. It's humble. It's respectful. It acknowledges the authority structure, but it doesn't compromise the conviction. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. God honored the faithfulness, not with a miracle that defied nature, but with a natural outcome that exceeded expectation. They were healthier. They looked better. They were thriving, not despite their obedience, but because of it. Not in spite of their faithfulness, but through it. Now you might be thinking, okay, nice story about a diet, but let me show you what's really happening here, what this means for your life tonight. Daniel is in the belly of the empire that destroyed everything he loved. He's surrounded by people trying to erase his identity. He has every reason to just go along, to compromise, to say God will understand. I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to make it through. I'm just trying to stay alive. Surely God doesn't expect me to risk everything over food. But Daniel understands something crucial, something that most of us miss when we're in the hard seasons. Small obediences in hidden moments are how you stay tethered to your true identity when everything is trying to redefine you. He's not making a big public stand yet. He's not preaching in the streets. He's not organizing a revolt. He's just quietly choosing vegetables. He's saying, in this one area where I have any choice at all, in this one moment where I have any agency, I'm going to choose faithfulness. And this is so important for you to understand because maybe you're feeling powerless right now. Maybe you feel like you don't have control over anything. You can't control the diagnosis. You can't control the economy. You can't control what your boss decides. You can't control whether they call you back. You can't control if the relationship works out. You can't control how your kids turn out. You can't control any of the big things. But you can control the small things. You can control what time you wake up tomorrow. You can control whether you open your Bible or scroll social media first. You can control whether you pray or panic when the anxiety hits. You can control whether you speak kindly or bitterly. You can control whether you're faithful in the small moment in front of you. And what Daniel discovered, what you need to discover tonight, is that God honors faithfulness in the small things by opening doors in the big things. You don't have to orchestrate your breakthrough. You don't have to manipulate your way into favor. You just have to be faithful where you are, with what you have, in the moment you're in, and God will handle the rest. And watch what God does. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king spoke with them, and among all of them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. 10 times better. Not slightly better. Not just as good. Not in the same category, but a little bit ahead. 10 times better than everyone else. Than all the magicians who'd been studying for decades. Than all the enchanters who'd been practicing their craft for a lifetime. These Hebrew teenagers were 10 times better than the experts. Why? Because God gave them learning and skill. The same God who gave Jerusalem into captivity gave these boys wisdom. The same God who allowed the destruction gave understanding. He was writing the whole story. The exile wasn't the end, it was the setup. The captivity wasn't the conclusion, it was the context for something greater. Daniel and his friends became the most valuable people in Babylon because they refused to let Babylon redefine them. They could live in Babylon, speak Babylonian, serve in Babylonian courts, but they remained faithful to the God of Israel. They could be in the empire without becoming the empire. They could serve the king without worshiping the king. And here's the first massive truth I want you to absorb tonight. The first principle that should change how you think about your circumstances. God doesn't need you to control your circumstances to write a good story. He excelled in Babylon while refusing to become Babylonian. He prospered in exile while maintaining his identity as an exile. He succeeded in the system while refusing to be defined by the system. Maybe you're in a Babylon right now, a job you hate but can't leave, a relationship that's broken but you're stuck in, a city that doesn't feel like home, a season of life that feels like exile, like you're far from where you're supposed to be, a situation that feels like captivity, like you're trapped and there's no way out. And you keep praying, God, get me out, change this, fix this, open a door, make a way, take me back to Jerusalem, take me back to how things used to be, take me back to when life made sense. But what if God is saying, I'm not taking you out yet? Not because I don't love you, not because I've forgotten you, not because I'm not powerful enough, but because I'm doing something in this Babylon that I can't do anywhere else. I'm going to show you how to be faithful right here, how to stay tethered to your true identity, even when everything around you is trying to rename you. I'm going to show you that your identity isn't determined by your location. Your calling isn't canceled by your circumstances. Your purpose doesn't depend on your proximity to what's familiar. Let me read you what happens next, because this is where the story gets intense, where Daniel's faithfulness is going to be tested in a way he never imagined. In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Isn't that interesting? The most powerful man in the world, the king who just conquered Jerusalem, who has everything he wants, and he can't sleep. Sound familiar? I'm guessing that's why you're listening to this right now. Because sleep has left you. Because your spirit is troubled. Because something is keeping you awake. Power, success, control, none of it guarantees peace. Nebuchadnezzar has armies, palaces, wealth, absolute authority. He can have anyone executed with a word. He can take whatever he wants. He controls the largest empire on earth. And his sleep still left him, because having control doesn't mean having peace. You can control your entire empire and still not be able to control your own mind. You can have authority over nations and still have no authority over your anxiety. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. This is standard procedure. The king tells them the dream. They make up an interpretation that sounds good, and everyone goes home happy. But Nebuchadnezzar is about to do something unprecedented. Now watch this. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and its interpretation. This is insane. This is impossible. He's not asking them to interpret a dream, he tells them. He's asking them to tell him what he dreamed and then interpret it. And if they can't, he's going to execute all of them and destroy their families and burn their houses down. This is paranoia. This is tyranny. This is a man so troubled by a dream he can't remember that he's willing to kill everyone if they can't tell him what it was. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, There is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. They're right. This is impossible. No human can do this. No amount of training or study or practice or experience can pull a dream out of someone else's mind. They're basically saying, You're asking us to be gods, and we're not. Only a god could do what you're asking, and the gods don't live with humans. They're out there somewhere, distant, unknowable, unreachable. But here's what they don't know. There's a Hebrew exile in the palace, renamed but not redefined, serving a God whose dwelling is with flesh, who would one day become flesh, who knows every dream before it's dreamed, every thought before it's thought, every word before it's spoken. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Daniel's about to be executed for a test he didn't even take, for a dream he wasn't asked to interpret, for a situation he had no part in creating. This is so unfair. He's been faithful. He's been excellent. He's done everything right. He's been 10 times better than everyone else. If you've ever felt like you've done everything right and still ended up in crisis, you know exactly how Daniel feels in this moment. Sometimes faithfulness doesn't protect you from chaos. Sometimes excellence doesn't shield you from other people's insanity. Sometimes you get caught in the collateral damage of a world that's broken. Sometimes you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes other people's dysfunction becomes your crisis. You've been faithful at work, and then there's layoffs. You've been faithful in your marriage, and then your spouse has an affair. You've been faithful with your health, and then you get a diagnosis. You've been faithful with your finances, and then the economy crashes. And you're lying there thinking, I did everything right. Where is God? Why is this happening? I thought faithfulness was supposed to protect me. But watch what Daniel does. Watch his response to injustice. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. Daniel doesn't panic. He doesn't run. He doesn't protest the injustice. He doesn't rage about how unfair this is. He responds with prudence and discretion. He asks a question. He gathers information. He requests time. He's calm in a crisis. He's steady when everyone else is spiraling. How? How is this possible? Because Daniel has spent years learning that God is in control. He spent years practicing faithfulness in small things. He spent years developing a relationship with God that isn't dependent on circumstances. So when the crisis comes, when the impossible situation arrives, he already knows where to go. He already knows who to turn to. And then, this is crucial, then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. When Daniel faces something impossible, he doesn't try to solve it himself. He gathers his friends, and they pray. They seek mercy. They acknowledge this is beyond them. They're not pretending they can figure this out. They're not trying to manufacture a solution. They're not panicking and grasping. They're praying and trusting. And here's the revolutionary part, the part that should change your prayer life tonight. They pray to the God of heaven while standing in Babylon. They didn't wait until they got back to Jerusalem to have access to God. They didn't say, well, the temple's destroyed, so I guess we can't reach God anymore. They didn't think geography determined God's presence. They discovered that the God of heaven meets you wherever you are, even in exile, even in crisis, even when you're about to be executed for something you didn't do. You don't have to be in the right place to pray. You don't have to be in the right season. You don't have to have your life together. You can pray from Babylon. You can pray from the pit. You can pray from the hospital room, the courtroom, the unemployment line, the prison cell. You can pray from the divorce, the addiction, the depression, the failure. God hears prayers from Babylon just as clearly as prayers from Jerusalem. And then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. Listen to what Daniel is saying. Listen to his theology in this moment. Before he even goes to the king, before he knows if he'll survive, before he has any guarantee of what will happen next, he stops to worship. He praises God for being in control of kings and kingdoms, of times and seasons. He's saying, even if Nebuchadnezzar kills me, even if I don't survive this, even if this is the end of my story, God is still sovereign. God still removes kings and sets up kings. My death doesn't change God's authority. My execution doesn't alter God's sovereignty. My life or death is just one sentence in a story God is writing that spans millennia. This is the kind of faith that only comes when you've stopped trying to author your own story. This is worship that's detached from outcome. This is praise that doesn't depend on deliverance. Daniel isn't bargaining with God. He's not saying, "Thanks for the vision, now please save my life." He's not negotiating. He's worshiping the God who controls outcomes, whether or not Daniel gets the outcome he wants. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's matter. He gives thanks. Not for the outcome, yet he doesn't know the outcome. He gives thanks for God's character, for God's faithfulness to answer prayer, for God's willingness to reveal what was hidden. This is mature faith. This is trusting God not because you got what you wanted, but because God is who he says he is. Then Daniel went to Arioch and said to him, "Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation." His first request is, don't destroy the wise men. These are the same guys who just said what the king wants is impossible. These are his competitors. These are the people who, if they survive, will continue to be obstacles to Daniel's influence. But Daniel's first thought is, save them. He's thinking about others even while facing his own execution. He's interceding for his enemies. He's showing mercy to the people who showed him none. This is what it looks like when you're not trying to control your own story anymore. You can afford to be generous. You can afford to be merciful. You can afford to care about others because your life isn't just about you anymore. It's about the story God is writing through you. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste and said to him, "I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation." The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, "Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation?" Notice the king still calls him Belteshazzar. He still uses the Babylonian name, the name that tried to erase his identity, the name that declared allegiance to a false god. But names don't determine identity. God does. You can call Daniel whatever you want. You can try to rename him, reprogram him, redefine him, but he knows who he is, and he knows whose he is. And Daniel answered the king, "No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days." Daniel immediately deflects credit. He doesn't say, "Yes, I can do this." He doesn't say, "Let me show you my skills." He doesn't take this opportunity to elevate himself. He says, "There's a God in heaven who can do this. I'm just the messenger. I'm just the mouthpiece. I'm just the conduit." He's not trying to prove himself. He's pointing to his author. And this is so crucial for those of us who want influence, who want to make an impact, who want our lives to matter. The way up is down. The way to elevation is humility. The way to be used by God is to deflect glory to God. Daniel is standing before the most powerful man in the world with an opportunity to look brilliant, and he's saying, "It's not me, it's God." And ironically, That posture is what makes him unforgettable. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be made known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. 3 times Daniel makes it clear this isn't me, this is God. I'm not smarter than everyone else. I don't have special abilities. God revealed this to me not because I deserved it, but because He wanted you to know it. I'm just the delivery system. He's the source. And then He tells the dream, "You saw, O king, and behold a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold, all together were broken in pieces, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth." Now, let me pause here because this dream is about to blow the king's mind, and it should blow ours too. This isn't just about Babylon. This isn't just about Nebuchadnezzar. This is God pulling back the curtain on all of human history. Daniel is about to reveal the rise and fall of empires that won't even exist for centuries, empires that haven't been thought of yet, kingdoms that are still hundreds of years in the future. And he does it standing in the palace of the first empire, wearing the name they gave him, speaking the language they taught him, but serving the God they can't control. This was the dream. Now, we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the might and the glory, and into whose hand He has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. So Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold. Babylon is the first empire, the most valuable metal, the most glorious kingdom. But watch what comes next. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things, and like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. Daniel is predicting 4 empires: Babylon, the head of gold, then Media-Persia, the chest and arms of silver, then Greece, the belly and thighs of bronze, then Rome, the legs of iron. He's seeing centuries into the future. And here's the thing, this isn't vague prophecy. This isn't generic prediction that could mean anything. This literally happened exactly as Daniel described it. Babylon fell to the Medo-Persian Empire in 539 BC. Then Persia fell to Alexander the Great and Greece in 331 BC. Then Greece fell to Rome in 63 BC. Every empire Daniel described rose and fell exactly as predicted. The sequence, the characteristics, the progression, all of it accurate down to the details. This is why Daniel is considered one of the most historically verifiable prophetic books in Scripture. But the most important part isn't the empires that fall, it's what comes last. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. Every human kingdom falls. Gold crumbles, silver tarnishes, bronze corrodes, iron rusts, clay breaks. Every empire, no matter how powerful, no matter how glorious, no matter how permanent it seems, eventually falls. But there's coming a kingdom cut out by no human hand, a kingdom established not by military might or political strategy or human effort, but by God Himself, a kingdom that will never end. Daniel is seeing the kingdom of God, the kingdom that Jesus would inaugurate centuries later when He stood in Galilee and said, "The kingdom of God is at hand," the kingdom that would outlast Rome, outlast every empire that has ever existed or ever will exist. The kingdom that's still expanding today, still growing, still advancing, while every human kingdom rises and falls like waves. Think about this: Babylon gone, Persia gone, Greece gone, Rome gone, every superpower in history gone. But the kingdom of Jesus, still here, still growing, still transforming lives, still changing the world. The stone cut without hands has become a mountain filling the whole earth, just as Daniel predicted. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. And look at how the king responds. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, "Truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery." The most powerful man on earth just fell on his face before a Hebrew exile. Think about that. The king who just conquered Jerusalem, who destroyed the temple, who enslaved God's people, is now worshiping on the floor in front of a Jewish teenager. Why? Because Daniel served a God who knows the end from the beginning, who holds empires in His hands like dust, who sees centuries like we see seconds. This is what happens when you stop trying to author your own story and let God write through you. You don't have to make yourself impressive. You don't have to manipulate your way to influence. You just have to be faithful, and God will do things through you that you never could have orchestrated yourself. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. So the exiles are now running Babylon. The captives are now in charge. The renamed are now writing policy. The enslaved are now the administrators. The teenagers who were dragged from Jerusalem in chains are now the most powerful people in the empire after the king himself. But here's what I need you to see. Daniel didn't do this by trying to control his circumstances. He did it by staying faithful in circumstances he couldn't control. He didn't manipulate his way to power. He prayed his way to influence. He didn't climb the ladder. God elevated him. He didn't network his way to the top. God positioned him there because He could trust Daniel with authority, since Daniel had learned not to grasp for it. And here's the question for you tonight. What if the Babylon you're in right now isn't the end of your story, but the middle? What if God is positioning you exactly where He needs you, teaching you exactly what you need to learn, preparing you for a chapter you can't see yet? What if this exile isn't punishment but preparation? What if this wilderness isn't abandonment but training? What if this waiting isn't wasted but necessary? What if God is doing what He did with Daniel, stripping away everything you thought defined you so you can discover who you really are? Stripping away the titles, the status, the security, the certainty. So you can learn that your identity doesn't come from any of that. So you can discover that when everything else is taken away, God remains, and He's enough. Daniel is about to be tested again. And this time, it won't be his wisdom that's on trial. It'll be his worship. And this is where we meet his three friends in their most defining moment. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. 60 cubits high, that's 90 feet. That's a 9-story golden statue. Picture this in your mind. This isn't a little idol. This is a massive monument to Nebuchadnezzar's ego. He had a dream where he was the head of gold, and now he's built a statue that's entirely gold. He's saying, I don't want to be just the head. I want to be the whole statue. I don't want my kingdom to fall and be replaced by silver and bronze and iron. I want it to last forever. This statue is Nebuchadnezzar's rebellion against the dream God gave him. And then Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image. So everyone comes, all the leaders, all the officials, all the important people from every province. This is a mandatory assembly. This is a demonstration of power. This is Nebuchadnezzar saying, I control this empire, and I control you. And the herald proclaimed aloud, You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning, fiery furnace. So this is the test. Bow or burn, conform or die, worship the king's image or be executed. It's that simple. There's no middle ground. There's no negotiation. There's no exception clause. When the music plays, you bow or you burn. And for most people, this was an easy choice. Survival trumps conviction. Safety trumps integrity. Living trumps taking a stand. When the music played, everyone bowed. The satraps bowed. The prefects bowed. The governors bowed. Thousands of people fell on their faces before this golden statue, because most people, when faced with bow or burn, will bow. Most people will compromise their convictions if the alternative is suffering. Most people will go along to get along. Most people will worship whatever they're told to worship, if the consequence for refusal is death. Everyone except 3. Therefore, at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Now notice what the accusers emphasize. These men you appointed, you trusted them, you gave them power, you elevated them, you honored them, and they're defying you. They're disrespecting you. They're rebelling against you. It's not just about religion. It's about loyalty, about authority, about control, about who really rules this empire. This is always what happens when you refuse to bow to what everyone else is bowing to. People take it personally. They accuse you of disrespect, of pride, of thinking you're better than everyone else. They can't understand why you won't just go along. They can't fathom why you would risk everything over something they consider trivial. And their accusation is always some version of, you think you're special, you think you're above the rules, you're causing problems for everyone. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up?" He's giving them another chance. He doesn't want to kill them. They're valuable. They're excellent. They run his province. They're Daniel's friends, and Daniel just saved his life. He likes these guys. He wants them to comply. He's basically saying, surely there's been a misunderstanding. Surely you didn't actually refuse. Surely if I give you another opportunity, you'll do the reasonable thing and bow. Now if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? This is the ultimate power move. This is control at its most blatant. Nebuchadnezzar is saying, I control your life. I control your death. I control everything. Your God is irrelevant here. Your faith is meaningless in the face of my authority. Bow or burn. It's that simple. And no God is going to save you if you choose burn. I am the power here. I am the authority. I am the one you should fear. And most of us, if we're honest, would bow. Most of us would rationalize it. It's just a statue. It doesn't mean anything. God knows my heart. This isn't worth dying over. I can be more useful alive than dead. I'll bow on the outside, but worship God on the inside. I'll comply externally, but resist internally. I'll give my body, but keep my soul. This is wisdom, right? This is prudence. This is being smart. Why die for nothing? But watch what these three say. Watch this response that has echoed through history, that has inspired martyrs and heroes for 3,000 years. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. We have no need to answer you. That's bold. That's almost rude. They're not going to defend themselves. They're not going to explain. They're not going to negotiate. There's nothing to discuss here. The matter is settled. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. They're saying, our God can save us. He's powerful enough. He's sovereign enough. He could strike you dead right now. He could turn this furnace cold. He could do anything. We're not questioning his ability. We're not doubting his power. But then they say something even more radical, something that should fundamentally change how you think about faith. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. This is the most important sentence in the chapter. But if not, even if God doesn't save us, even if we burn, even if this is the end of our story, even if this is how we die, even if God chooses not to deliver us, we're still not bowing, because our worship isn't conditional on our deliverance. Our faithfulness isn't dependent on God doing what we want. Our loyalty to God doesn't require him to rescue us. We trust God's character even when we can't see his plan. We worship him whether he saves us or not. This is the faith that changes everything. This is the faith that most of us don't have yet but desperately need. Most of us treat God like a vending machine. I'll put in my faithfulness. I'll insert my obedience. I'll push the prayer button, and you give me my desired outcome. You heal my disease. You save my marriage. You provide the job. You fix the situation. And if you don't, then what's the point? If you don't come through for me, then I don't know if I can keep trusting you. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are saying something different. something revolutionary. We'll worship you whether you save us or not. We'll trust you whether you deliver us or not. We'll be faithful whether we get the outcome we want or not, because you're worthy of worship regardless of what happens to us. Because our faith isn't in what you do for us. Our faith is in who you are. This is mature faith. This is the faith of Job, who said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." This is the faith of Jesus in Gethsemane, who said, "Not my will but yours be done." This is the faith that can endure anything, because it's not dependent on comfortable outcomes. It's anchored in God's unchanging character. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated, and he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. 7 times hotter. He's so angry he's going to make sure they suffer as much as possible before they die. He's going to show everyone in the empire what happens when you defy the king. This isn't just execution. This is torture. This is a demonstration of power. This is rage. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent, and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The furnace was so hot it killed the soldiers who threw them in. Think about that. These are trained soldiers, strong men, probably the biggest, toughest guys in the army. And just getting close enough to throw the 3 men in was fatal. The heat was so intense it killed them before they could step back. This isn't a metaphor. This isn't hyperbole. This is an actual execution. An actual fire hot enough to kill on contact. And these 3 are about to die for refusing to compromise their worship. But then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. There are 4 men in the fire. They went in bound. Now they're unbound. They went in to burn. Now they're walking. They went in to die. Now they're alive." And there's a 4th figure, and even Nebuchadnezzar, a pagan king with no theological training, can tell this isn't human. This is divine. The appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. This is one of the most beautiful pictures in all of Scripture. God didn't prevent the fire. He entered it with them. He didn't spare them from the furnace. He met them in the furnace. He didn't remove the trial. He walked through the trial with them. And here's the theological earthquake that should change how you understand suffering. Sometimes, God's presence isn't about deliverance from the trial. Sometimes it's about presence in the trial. Sometimes He doesn't take you out. Sometimes He comes in with you. Sometimes the miracle isn't that the fire doesn't burn. Sometimes the miracle is that you're not alone in the fire. You might be praying, "God, get me out of this fire. End this season. Change this situation. Fix this problem. Deliver me from this trial." And God is saying, "I'm not taking you out yet, but I'm not leaving you alone. I'm coming in with you. You're not facing this alone. I'm the 4th man in your furnace." This is why Jesus said, "I will never leave you or forsake you. Not I will never let bad things happen to you. Not I will prevent every trial. Not I will keep you from suffering, but I will never leave you. I will be with you. In the fire, in the flood, in the valley, in the darkness, in the trial. I will be there." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. They walked out of a furnace so hot it killed the guards who threw them in, and they don't even smell like smoke. There's not a mark on them. God didn't just protect them. He completely removed every trace of the fire's power over them. And this is the promise for you tonight. Whatever fire you're in right now, whatever trial is trying to consume you, it won't have the final word. It won't leave a permanent mark. When you walk out, and notice I said when, not if, when you walk out, you won't even smell like smoke. The things that were meant to destroy you won't have any power over your future. The pain that feels so overwhelming right now won't define you forever. The abuse won't define you. The divorce won't define you. The addiction won't define you. The failure won't define you. You'll walk through it with God, and you'll come out without even the smell of smoke on you." And Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God." Even the pagan king recognizes what just happened. They trusted, they yielded, they refused to compromise, and God showed up in the fire. Therefore I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. They were about to be executed. Now they're promoted. They were sentenced to death. Now they're getting raises. They were facing the worst possible outcome. Now they're experiencing unprecedented favor. Why? Because they refused to bow to what everyone else was bowing to. Because they stayed faithful when everyone else compromised. Because they were willing to burn rather than betray their God. And here's what I want you to hear tonight as you're lying there. Whatever fire you're in, whatever furnace feels like it's consuming you, whatever trial seems too hot to survive, God hasn't abandoned you. He's in there with you. He's the fourth man in your fire. And when you walk out, not if, when you walk out, you won't even smell like smoke. The cancer won't define your future. The bankruptcy won't define your future. The betrayal won't define your future. The failure won't define your future. You're going to walk through this fire with God, and you're going to come out with a testimony that makes even your enemies praise God's name. You're going to come out promoted, elevated, blessed in ways you can't imagine right now, because that's what God does. He takes the furnaces meant to destroy you and turns them into the platforms that display His glory. Now let me take you to one of the strangest chapters in the Bible, a chapter that's actually written by Nebuchadnezzar himself. Daniel chapter 4 is a testimony, a confession, a public proclamation from the king. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are His signs, how mighty His wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and His dominion endures from generation to generation. This is the same king who made a golden image and demanded worship. The same king who threatened to tear people limb from limb. The same king who threw 3 men into a furnace. And now he's writing a letter to the whole world saying God is the true king. What happened? How did we get from the furnace to this testimony? I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. I saw a dream that made me afraid. As I lay in bed, the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. So I made a decree that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. So we're doing this again. Another dream, another crisis. Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. At last Daniel came in before me, he who was named Belteshazzar after the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and I told him the dream. Notice Nebuchadnezzar still doesn't fully understand. He thinks Daniel has the spirit of the holy gods, plural. He doesn't yet understand monotheism. He hasn't fully grasped that there's only one God. But he knows Daniel is different. He knows Daniel has access to something the others don't. He knows Daniel can see what others can't see. And Daniel tells him the dream, and it's terrifying. It's about a great tree that reaches to heaven, that shelters all the birds and animals, that provides food and shade for everyone, that the whole world can see. And then a watcher, a holy one, comes down from heaven and says, "Chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him." And Daniel, compassionate Daniel, has to tell the king what this means. He doesn't want to. The text says Daniel was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. He's genuinely troubled by what he has to say, because he cares about Nebuchadnezzar. Even though Nebuchadnezzar is the king who destroyed his homeland, Daniel has developed a relationship with him over the years. He doesn't want to see him suffer, but he has to tell the truth. The tree is you, O king. You have grown and become strong. Your greatness has grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. But the decree is that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. God is about to humble the most powerful man on earth by turning him into an animal. Literally, for 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar is going to lose his mind, crawl on all fours, eat grass like cattle, live in fields like a beast. Why? Till you know that the Most High rules. That's the whole point, the whole purpose of this humiliation. Nebuchadnezzar thinks he's in control. He thinks his power, his kingdom, his success are his own doing. He thinks he built this empire with his own strength. So God is going to strip all of that away until Nebuchadnezzar learns the fundamental truth of the universe. God is in control, not you. And Daniel, merciful Daniel, tries to warn him, tries to give him an out. Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps be a lengthening of your prosperity. He's saying, repent, change, show mercy, humble yourself before God has to humble you. Maybe if you humble yourself voluntarily, God won't have to do it forcibly. Maybe if you acknowledge now that He's in control, you won't have to learn it the hard way. But all this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, and the king answered and said, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence, and for the glory of my majesty?" God gave him 12 months, a whole year to repent, to change, to humble himself. And what does Nebuchadnezzar do? He stands on the roof of his palace and gives a speech about how great he is, how powerful he is, how he built all this with his own hands. My power, my glory, my kingdom. I did this. Me. While the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. And you shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. Immediately, while the words were still in his mouth, immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven till his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. 7 years. 7 years of insanity. 7 years of crawling in fields, eating grass, living like an animal. Can you imagine? The king of the world reduced to a beast. The most powerful man alive reduced to madness. The one who controlled empires couldn't even control his own mind. Well, and here's what we need to understand. This wasn't cruelty. This was mercy. God loved Nebuchadnezzar enough to break him before pride destroyed him eternally. God loved him enough to humble him forcibly, since he wouldn't humble himself voluntarily. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to us is the best thing that could have happened to us. Sometimes God has to strip away everything we're trusting in to show us that He's the only thing worth trusting. But then listen to this. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored Him who lives forever, for His dominion is an everlasting dominion, and His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and He does according to His will among the host of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay His hand or say to Him, "What have you done?" This is the most important conversion in the Old Testament, outside of Israel itself. After 7 years of eating grass, after 7 years of living like an animal, Nebuchadnezzar finally looks up. That's all it took. He lifted his eyes to heaven. He stopped looking at himself, stopped looking at his circumstances, stopped looking down, and looked up. And when he looked up, his reason returned. And his first response wasn't to bemoan what he'd lost or rage about what had happened. His first response was to worship, to bless the Most High, to praise Him, to honor Him, to say, "You're in control, not me. I'm nothing. You're everything. You do what you want and no one can stop you. No one can question you. You're sovereign over everything and everyone, and that's exactly how it should be." This is genuine repentance. This is true humility. This isn't just admitting you were wrong, it's celebrating that God is right. It's praising Him for being sovereign, even when His sovereignty meant your humiliation. It's honoring Him for being in control, even when His control meant stripping yours away. And watch what happens when Nebuchadnezzar stops grasping for control and surrenders to God's authority. At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. When he stopped trying to control everything, when he surrendered to God's authority, God gave him back his kingdom. But now Nebuchadnezzar ruled differently, not as someone grasping for control, but as someone who knew he was a steward, not an owner. not as someone building his own glory, but as someone recognizing that all glory belongs to God, not as someone trusting in his own power, but as someone acknowledging that all power comes from God. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. Those who walk in pride he is able to humble. Nebuchadnezzar learned this the hardest way possible. He learned it by eating grass for 7 years. He learned it by losing everything. He learned it by being broken completely. But he learned it, and when he learned it, everything was restored. Not just restored, increased. Still more greatness was added. And here's why this story matters for you tonight. Lying there in the dark, feeling like you're losing control. Maybe God is letting you lose control so you can learn who's really in control. Maybe the thing you're afraid of losing, the relationship, the job, the dream, the plan, the vision of your life, maybe that's not the disaster. Maybe that's the invitation to look up, to stop trusting in your own ability to control outcomes and start trusting in God's sovereign authorship. Nebuchadnezzar had to eat grass for 7 years to learn what Daniel knew at 15 in chains. God is the author. We're the characters. And the sooner we stop trying to rewrite the script, the sooner we find peace. The sooner we stop grasping for control, the sooner we experience the freedom of surrender. The sooner we look up and say, "You're in control, and I'm not." The sooner we discover that that's not a tragedy, it's a relief. Let me jump ahead now because I want to take you to Daniel's own lion's den, his own personal furnace, the moment when everything he's learned about God's sovereignty is going to be tested. Daniel served in Babylon for 70 years. Think about that. 70 years. He saw multiple kings come and go. He saw the empire that destroyed his home eventually fall to Persia, exactly as he predicted. He lived through the literal fulfillment of prophecies he'd been given decades earlier. And he never went home. He never saw Jerusalem rebuilt. But he was faithful every single day for 70 years. And now we come to Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Daniel is probably in his 80s now. Most people his age would be retired, taking it easy, coasting into the sunset. But Daniel is still excellent, still distinguished, still the best at what he does. He's outlasted empires, outlasted regimes, outlasted kings, and he's still standing, still faithful, still effective, still sharp, because excellence and faithfulness aren't age-dependent, they're character-dependent. But excellence breeds envy. Success creates enemies. Being distinguished above others makes you a target. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. They investigated him. They dug into his past. They tried to find dirt. They looked for scandals, for mistakes, for anything they could use against him. They audited his work. They examined his decisions. They interviewed people who worked with him, and they found nothing. Nothing. Zero. Not a single mistake. Not a single ethical lapse. Not a single moment where he cut a corner or compromised his integrity. Daniel's life was so clean, so consistent, so faithful for so many decades that his enemies couldn't find a single thing to accuse him of. That's remarkable. That's what happens when you live your whole life with integrity. When you're faithful in secret as well as in public. When your private life matches your public reputation. When there are no hidden compromises, no secret sins, no ethical gray areas. Then these men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." So they're going to use his faithfulness against him. They're going to turn his worship into a crime. They're going to make his godliness illegal, because that's the only way they can get him. The only angle they have is his devotion to God. Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction, that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. It's a trap. A clever trap. They're playing to the king's ego. They're saying everyone agrees that for 30 days, you should be the only one anyone prays to. You should be elevated above all gods and all men. It sounds like honor. It sounds like loyalty. It sounds like they're trying to unify the kingdom around the king. But it's a trap specifically designed to catch Daniel. Because they know Daniel prays 3 times a day. They know he's been doing it for decades. They know he won't stop. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore King Darius signed the document and injunction, and the trap is set. The law is established. And because it's a law of the Medes and Persians, not even the king can change it. It's irrevocable. Once it's signed, it's permanent. For 30 days, prayer to anyone but the king is illegal, punishable by death, by being thrown into a den of lions. And here's the moment of decision, the moment that defines Daniel's whole life, the moment that shows us what 70 years of faithfulness has produced. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. This is revolutionary. This is the heart of faithfulness. Daniel didn't make a big show of civil disobedience. He didn't go pray in public to prove a point. He didn't gather a crowd or organize a protest. He just went home and did what he'd always done. He opened his windows toward Jerusalem, toward the city he'd never see again, toward the temple that had been destroyed 70 years ago, and he prayed, as he had done previously, as he had done previously. That phrase is everything. This wasn't a new practice. This wasn't Daniel suddenly becoming bold. This was Daniel being consistent. He'd been praying this way for decades, 3 times a day, facing Jerusalem, for 70 years. And he wasn't about to stop now just because it became illegal. Faithfulness doesn't need an audience. Faithfulness doesn't require attention. Faithfulness isn't about making a statement. Daniel wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to be a martyr. He was just being who he'd always been, even when it became illegal, even when it cost him everything. Because his identity wasn't determined by what was legal or popular or safe. His identity was determined by whose he was. And here's what's so powerful about this. Daniel could have rationalized compromise so easily. He could have said, "I'll pray secretly. I'll pray silently. I'll pray in my head where no one can see. I'll just close the windows. I'll just skip 30 days. What's 30 days out of 70 years? God will understand. Surely God doesn't expect me to die over this. Surely wisdom means preserving my life so I can keep serving later." But Daniel understood something most of us don't. Compromise in the moment of testing erases decades of faithfulness. If he compromised now, everything he'd stood for would be questioned. If he hid his faith when it became dangerous, what did his faith really mean? If he only worshipped God when it was convenient, was he really worshiping God at all? Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "Did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. They've got him. The law is clear. The violation is obvious. There's no way out." Then they answered and said before the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day." Notice how they phrase it, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah. They're reminding the king that Daniel is an outsider. He's not really one of us. He's a foreigner. He's from that conquered people. And he's defying you. He's disrespecting you. He's breaking your law. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Darius doesn't want to kill Daniel. He realizes he's been manipulated. He realizes this whole law was a trap to get Daniel. And he tries everything to find a loophole, to find a way out, to rescue Daniel. He's the king. He should be able to do something. But he can't. He's trapped by his own law. And this is the irony of control. The one thing the king can't control is the consequence of his own decree. He has absolute power, but he's powerless to save the man he wants to save. He can't undo what he set in motion. He's learned what Nebuchadnezzar learned. Being king doesn't mean being in control. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." Even the pagan king is praying to Daniel's God. He's saying, "I can't save you, but maybe your God can." And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. The den is sealed. Daniel is trapped inside with lions, hungry lions, predators, and there's no escape, no hope, no last-minute rescue. The stone is sealed with the king's signet. There's no changing this. There's no reversing this. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. The king can't sleep. The most powerful man in the empire is tossing and turning, tormented by guilt and fear. He's up all night, pacing, worrying, wondering if there's anything he can do. He can't eat. He can't be entertained. He can't distract himself. His sleep has fled from him. But Daniel? Daniel in a pit of lions? Daniel who's about to be eaten alive? Daniel is resting, because peace doesn't come from being in control. Peace doesn't come from being safe. Peace doesn't come from comfortable circumstances. Peace comes from knowing who's in control. And Daniel has spent 70 years learning that God is in control. So even in a lion's den, even facing death, even in the most terrifying situation imaginable, Daniel can rest. Think about this. The king in his palace can't sleep. Daniel in the lion's den sleeps peacefully. The king with all his power and security is tormented. Daniel with no power and no security is at peace. Why? Because the king is learning he's not in control. And Daniel already knows he's not in control, and he knows who is. Then at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, Servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? He's calling him servant of the living God, not servant of the king, not official of the empire, servant of the living God. The God who Daniel has served continually, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. The God Daniel never stopped serving, never stopped worshiping. And from the darkness of the pit, from the den of death, a voice. Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king, I have done no harm. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. God didn't remove the lions. God didn't take Daniel out of the den. God shut the lions' mouths while Daniel was in the den with them. All night long, Daniel was surrounded by predators. All night long, he could hear them breathing, could smell them, could feel their presence. But they didn't touch him. Not a scratch, not a bite, not even a threat. God didn't just save Daniel. He gave Daniel a night of rest in the place designed for his death. He turned the execution chamber into a bedroom. He made the den of death a place of peace. Because that's what God does. He takes the places meant to destroy us and transforms them into places where we encounter his presence. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Because he had trusted, not because he was perfect, not because he earned it, not because he manipulated the outcome, not because he controlled the situation, because he trusted. That's it. That's the secret. Trust. 70 years of learning to trust God. 70 years of staying faithful when he couldn't see the outcome. 70 years of worshiping God, whether he got what he wanted or not. And in the moment of ultimate testing, that trust saved his life. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. They, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. The same lions that didn't touch Daniel immediately devoured his accusers. This wasn't about the lions being well-fed or sleepy. This wasn't about them being old or docile. This was about God's protection. The lions were just as hungry, just as fierce, just as dangerous when Daniel was there, but God shut their mouths. And when God's protection was lifted, the lions did what lions do. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." Another king, another testimony. First Nebuchadnezzar after the furnace, now Darius after the lion's den. Both kings learned that the God of Daniel, the God of the Hebrew exiles, the God of the people they conquered, is the true God, the living God, the God whose kingdom lasts forever, while human kingdoms rise and fall. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. 70 years. Daniel started as a teenager dragged from Jerusalem in chains. He's ending as an old man, respected by emperors, having survived empires, kings, conspiracies, furnaces, and lions. And through it all, he never compromised, never bowed to what everyone else was bowing to, never let circumstances redefine his identity, never stopped praying, never stopped trusting, never stopped being faithful. And now, we come to the visions, the dreams, the prophecies that are so detailed, so specific, so accurate that skeptics have tried to argue Daniel must have been written after these events happened, because no one could predict the future this precisely. But that's exactly the point. No one could, except God. These visions are going to show us that the same God who protected Daniel in the lion's den is the God who holds all of history in his hands. The same God who saved 3 men from a furnace is the God who knows the end from the beginning. The same God who interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dreams is the God who gave Daniel dreams that spanned centuries. And if that God is holding your story, you can trust him even when the chapter doesn't make sense. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another." Now we're in Daniel chapter 7, and things are about to get apocalyptic. The images are going to get strange. The symbolism is going to get heavy. But stay with me, because this matters. This isn't just about ancient history. This is about God revealing to Daniel and to us that he's been in control of all human history from the beginning. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. This is Babylon again. The lion with eagle's wings represents Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, powerful and swift. And the mind of a man being given to it probably references Nebuchadnezzar's 7 years of insanity and then his restoration. This vision is reinforcing what Daniel already knows. Babylon's rise and fall are in God's hands. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, "Arise, devour much flesh." This is the Medo-Persian Empire that would conquer Babylon. The 3 ribs probably represent the 3 major kingdoms Persia conquered: Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. The detail here is remarkable. Daniel is seeing empires that don't exist yet with characteristics that perfectly match what would happen. After this I looked, and behold, another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Greece. Alexander the Great conquered the known world faster than any military campaign in history, hence the 4 wings for incredible speed. And after his death, his empire was divided among his 4 generals, hence the 4 heads. This vision is so specific, so accurate, that you can map it directly to history. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful, and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Rome. The iron teeth matched the iron legs from Nebuchadnezzar's statue dream back in chapter 2. Rome was the most brutal, efficient, destructive empire the world had ever seen. It crushed everything in its path. And those 10 horns represent 10 kings or kingdoms that would emerge from Rome's legacy. Kingdoms that historians can identify in the breakup of the Roman Empire. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Scholars have debated this little horn for centuries. Some see it as Antiochus Epiphanes, a Greek ruler who desecrated the Jewish temple and tried to force Jews to abandon their faith. Others see it as a future Antichrist figure, a final human rebellion against God. Either way, It represents human pride and rebellion against God reaching its peak. It represents what happens when people try to control everything and oppose God's authority. But then the scene shifts, and this shift is everything. Because no matter what empires rise, no matter what kingdoms fall, no matter what human pride accomplishes, there's a throne that remains. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued, and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. This is one of the most majestic visions in all of Scripture. God Himself, the Ancient of Days, sitting in judgment over all human history, over all these empires and beasts and horns, over Babylon and Persia and Greece and Rome, over Nebuchadnezzar and Darius and Alexander and Caesar. They thought they were in control. They thought they were writing history. They thought their kingdoms would last forever. But God was always on the throne. God was always in control. God was always the author. And now the court is in session. Now the books are opened. Now every kingdom, every ruler, every empire that ever thought it was ultimate is revealed to be temporary, penultimate, subordinate to the one true King, whose throne is eternal. I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. All the empires fall. All the beasts are judged. All the kingdoms that thought they were ultimate are revealed to be temporary. Human pride, human power, human empires, they all end. They all crumble. They all face judgment. No kingdom lasts except God's kingdom. But then comes the most important vision in this entire chapter. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. Jesus. Daniel is seeing Jesus, one like a son of man. This is the title Jesus would use for himself more than any other. He's called the Ancient of Days God earlier in the vision. And now he sees one like a son of man coming to the Ancient of Days. He's seeing God the Father and God the Son. He's seeing the Trinity. He's seeing the plan of redemption. And this Son of Man is given a kingdom that will never end, a dominion that will never be destroyed. Babylon fell, Persia fell, Greece fell, Rome fell. Every empire Daniel saw rose and fell exactly as predicted. The Babylonian Empire lasted 87 years. The Persian Empire lasted 208 years. Alexander's Greek Empire lasted 13 years before fragmenting. The Roman Empire lasted 500 years in the west, longer in the east, but it fell. But the kingdom of the Son of Man, still here, still growing, still standing. 2,000 years after Jesus walked the earth, his kingdom is still expanding. More people follow Jesus today than followed him when he walked the earth. More people worship his name now than worshipped Caesar at Rome's peak. His kingdom is advancing, while every other kingdom is history. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there, and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me, and made known to me, the interpretation of the things. Even Daniel was freaked out by these visions. He didn't understand everything he was seeing. The images were terrifying. The implications were overwhelming. So he asked for help, for interpretation, for understanding. And here's what's so important about this. Daniel received massive revelation about the future of empires, about the coming Messiah, about the end of days, but he never received clarity about his own personal future. God showed him centuries of history, but never told him he'd go home to Jerusalem. Why? Why would God give Daniel this cosmic perspective on world history, but not give him clarity about his own life? Because we don't need to know our personal future to trust the God who holds all futures. Daniel could see the rise and fall of kingdoms spanning 6 centuries, but he couldn't see next year in his own life. And that was okay. It had to be okay, because knowing God is in control is more important than knowing what he's going to do next. This is the lesson for you tonight, lying there anxious about your future, worrying about what's coming, trying to control outcomes you can't control. You don't need to see the whole plan. You don't need to know how it all works out. You just need to know that the same God who held the destiny of empires in his hands is holding your life in his hands. And if he can be trusted with world history, he can be trusted with your story. Daniel asked questions. He wanted understanding, and God gave him some answers, but not all of them. The revelation was partial. The mystery remained mysterious in places. But Daniel didn't need complete understanding to maintain complete trust. He could live with unanswered questions because he knew the author. He could tolerate mystery because he'd spent a lifetime learning that God is faithful even when God is mysterious. Let me read you one more vision before we bring this all home. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision. In those days I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. I ate no delicacies. No meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all, for the full 3 weeks. Daniel is fasting, deeply, for 3 full weeks. He's probably in his 80s now, maybe even 90s. He's an old man. He's seen everything. He's survived everything. And he's still desperate for God. He's still seeking, still praying, still fasting. This tells us something crucial. Proximity to God doesn't increase with age by default. It increases with hunger. Daniel could have coasted into old age on his reputation, on his decades of faithfulness, on his history with God. But he's still pressing in, still seeking more, still hungry for God's presence and revelation. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. This description is almost identical to John's description of Jesus in Revelation 1. This is either an angel of the highest order or a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ himself, and the appearance is overwhelming, divine, glorious, terrifying in its brightness. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. For the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. So I was left alone and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in deep sleep with my face to the ground. The vision knocked him unconscious. The glory was too much. The presence was too powerful. This man who survived furnaces and lions' dens, who stood before kings without fear, who interpreted dreams that terrified emperors, this man falls unconscious at a vision of divine glory. And behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. Man greatly loved. After everything Daniel has been through, after 70 years of exile, after never seeing his home again, after serving in a foreign empire his whole life, after all the pain and loss and sacrifice, God calls him greatly loved, not greatly used, not greatly successful, not greatly accomplished, greatly loved. Your value to God isn't based on what you do for Him. It's based on His heart toward you. Daniel is loved not because he accomplished great things, but because God chose to love him. And while he was speaking this word to me, I stood up, trembling. Then he said to me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. From the first day, Daniel had been praying and fasting for 3 weeks, wondering if God was listening, wondering if his prayers were reaching heaven, wondering if anyone heard him. And the angel says, I've been on my way since day 1. Your prayers were heard immediately. I was dispatched the moment you started praying. But then he says something that should fundamentally change how we think about unanswered prayer. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. There's a war happening that we can't see. A spiritual battle in heavenly places. The angel was dispatched immediately, but was delayed by spiritual warfare. There's a prince of Persia, not the human king, but a demonic principality, a spiritual force that fought against this angel for 3 weeks. And it took Michael, one of the most powerful archangels, to break through. This is so crucial for understanding when prayers seem unanswered. The delay doesn't mean God isn't listening. The delay doesn't mean God said no. The delay doesn't mean you lack faith. It might mean there's a battle happening in places you can't see, a cosmic conflict between good and evil, between God's angels and demonic forces, and the answer is on its way, but it's being contested. Daniel didn't know about this battle. He couldn't see it. He just knew he was praying and nothing seemed to be happening. And he could have interpreted that delay as rejection or abandonment or God not caring. But the truth was, God cared so much that he dispatched an answer immediately and then reinforced it with angelic backup when the answer was opposed. And he said, Do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side against these, except Michael, your prince. There's a book of truth. Everything is already written. The rise of Greece. After Persia, it's already in the book. The conflicts, the wars, the transitions of power, all of it is already recorded. History isn't random. It's not chaotic. It's not out of control. It's unfolding according to a script that was written before the foundation of the world. And then the angel gives Daniel an incredibly detailed prophecy about the next several centuries of Middle Eastern history. Wars between the Ptolemaic and Seleucid kingdoms. The coming of Antiochus Epiphanes. The abomination of desolation. Conflicts so specific that when you read secular history, it matches Daniel's vision point by point. It's so accurate that skeptics insist it must have been written after the events, because the alternative that God actually knows the future is too disruptive to their worldview. But I want to focus on Daniel's response to all of this. After receiving all this revelation, after seeing empires rise and fall, after being called greatly loved, after being shown the future, Daniel says this, As for me, when I heard, my strength left me, and no breath remained in me. Then one in the likeness of the children of man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, O man greatly loved, fear not, peace be with you. Be strong and of good courage. Daniel needed to be strengthened twice just to handle the vision. He wasn't some superhero of faith. He wasn't some spiritual giant who never struggled. He was a human being overwhelmed by what God was showing him. The visions were too much. The glory was too bright. The future was too vast. And he needed divine strength just to keep standing. And when he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, "Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." And he said, "Do you know why I have come to you?" And then Daniel ends his book with these words, words that should change how we think about our own unfinished stories. "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." The book is sealed. Even Daniel doesn't understand everything he's written. The full meaning will be revealed later, at the proper time, when people need to know it. And isn't that true for your life too? You don't understand everything God is doing. The chapters don't make sense yet. The plot seems confusing. The story feels incomplete. But one day, when the book is unsealed, when you see the whole story from beginning to end, you'll understand why every confusing chapter had to be written exactly the way it was. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others stood, one on this bank of the stream, and one on that bank of the stream. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, "How long shall it be till the end of these wonders?" And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. Time, times, and half a time, 3.5 years, a specific period. God has set the timeline. Nothing is random. Nothing is chaotic. Nothing is out of control. Even the suffering has a limit. Even the trial has an end date. Even the pain is measured. God knows exactly how long every difficult season will last. And He's not letting it go 1 second longer than necessary. I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, "O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things?" He said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Go your way. Don't worry about understanding everything. Don't try to figure it all out. Just go. Keep living. Keep being faithful. Keep trusting. The words are sealed. The full meaning will be revealed when it needs to be revealed. And until then, just go your way." This is the call for you tonight. You want to know how it all works out. You want to know the outcome. You want to understand why this is happening. You want to see the end from the beginning. But God is saying what He said to Daniel. Go your way. Keep living. Keep being faithful. Keep trusting me. The words are sealed. You don't need to understand everything to trust me with everything. And then this, many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. Suffering refines, trials purify. The wicked won't get it. They'll keep acting wickedly, keep grasping for control, keep trying to author their own stories. But the wise will understand. And who are the wise? The ones who trust God even when they don't understand. The ones who stay faithful even when it doesn't make sense. The ones who worship God whether He delivers them or not. But you, go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. This is the last line of Daniel's book, and it's both devastating and beautiful. Go your way till the end. Keep going, Daniel. Keep serving. Keep praying. Keep being faithful. till the end. Not till you go home to Jerusalem, that's not happening. Not till you see your family again, they're gone. Not till you get the ending you wanted, that story is over. Just till the end. Till your life is complete. Till your race is finished. Till your story reaches its final chapter. And you shall rest. After 70 years of exile, after a lifetime of serving in a foreign land, after never seeing home again, you shall rest. And you shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days, the place God has been preparing for you all along, the place that's been waiting for you since before you were born, your allotted place, not the place you chose, not the place you planned, not the place you thought you deserved, the place God allotted for you. Daniel never got the ending he wanted. He wanted to go home to Jerusalem. He wanted to see the temple rebuilt. He wanted to walk the streets of the city of his childhood. He wanted to be buried with his ancestors. But he got something better. He got to be faithful for 70 years in the middle of someone else's empire. And in doing so, he became a light to kings, a voice to empires, a prophet whose words are still shaping how we understand history and the future. He thought his story ended when Jerusalem fell, but God was just turning the page. So, let me bring all of this home for you tonight. You came here because the title promised you something, that God is in control of your story. And maybe you were hoping I'd give you a formula, a prayer that would finally make everything make sense, a guarantee that if you just trust hard enough, you'll get the ending you've been begging for, the outcome you've been praying for, the resolution you've been desperate to see. But Daniel's story doesn't end that way. He never went home. He died in Babylon. The same man who saw the future of empires spanning 600 years never saw the future he personally wanted. He predicted the rise and fall of kingdoms he'd never lived to see, but he never predicted his own return to Jerusalem. And yet Scripture calls him greatly loved, not because he got his desired ending, because he trusted the author, even when the chapters didn't make sense. Here's your transformation. When you started listening tonight, you thought being out of control was your failure. You thought it meant you'd done something wrong, that you'd missed God's plan, that you'd derailed your destiny. Now you know it's your invitation. Invitation to stop trying to write a story you were never meant to author. Invitation to rest in the hands of the one who's been writing since before Babylon fell, and who's still writing long after your worries fade. Invitation to trust that the God who held empires in his hands while Daniel was in exile is holding your life while you're in the dark. So let me give you a mantra, something to say to yourself when you wake up at 3 in the morning and the anxiety starts clawing at your chest, when the worries start spiraling, when you can't see the path forward and you're terrified you've lost the plot. Say this: I am not the author of my story, and that is not my failure. That is my freedom. Say it again. I am not the author of my story, and that is not my failure. That is my freedom. Because if you're the author, you're responsible for making it all work out. If you're the author, every plot twist is your fault. Every closed door is your failure. Every painful chapter is your mistake. But if God is the author, then you can trust that He knows what He's doing even when you don't. You can trust that the painful chapters serve a purpose even when you can't see it. You can trust that the story will end well even when the middle is confusing. God doesn't need you to understand. He doesn't need you to see the whole manuscript. He needs you to trust Him with this page, this night, this breath, this moment, not the whole story, just this sentence, just this paragraph, just this chapter you're in right now. And here's the beautiful, terrifying truth. The same God who told Daniel about kingdoms centuries away is the same God who's with you in this bed, in this darkness, in this moment of not knowing. If He knew what would happen in Persia and Greece and Rome before those empires were even conceived, He knows what's going to happen to you tomorrow morning, and the day after that, and every day after that. And He's not worried. He's not panicking. He's not scrambling to figure out how to fix your life, because he's already written the end, and it's good. If you're still awake, here's what I want you to do. Don't try to figure it all out tonight. Don't try to solve the problem, or see the solution, or plan the next move. Just let what you've heard wash over you. Let the story of Daniel remind you that exile isn't the end, that the furnace isn't final, and that the lions don't get the last word. The author does. Daniel was renamed, but not redefined. They called him Belteshazzar, but he remained Daniel. He was captive, but not conquered. He was exiled, but not abandoned. He was in Babylon, but not of Babylon. He lived in the empire, but didn't become the empire. He served kings, but never worshipped them. And the same God who wrote Daniel's story is writing yours. Maybe you've been trying to control everything because you're afraid that if you let go, it'll all fall apart. If you don't hold it together, who will? If you don't have a plan, what will happen? If you don't know what's next, how will you survive? But what if letting go is how it finally comes together? What if the tighter you grip your story, the more it slips through your fingers? What if God is waiting for you to open your hands so he can fill them with something better than what you were holding? Daniel prayed, facing Jerusalem for 70 years, a city he couldn't see, a temple that was destroyed, a home he'd never returned to, but he prayed anyway, because faith isn't about seeing. It's about facing the right direction, even when you can't see anything at all. It's about turning toward hope even when hope feels impossible. It's about orienting your life toward God, even when circumstances are oriented toward chaos. So tonight, before you fall asleep, I want you to do what Daniel did. Turn toward hope, even if it feels like pretending, even if you can't see it. Physically turn your body toward the window, toward the sky, toward wherever Jerusalem is for you, wherever home is, wherever peace is, wherever God is. And just say, God, I can't see resolution, but I'm turning toward you anyway. I can't see the path forward, but I'm facing your direction. I don't understand the story, but I trust the author. And here's what I know. You won't wake up tomorrow with all your answers. The problems won't be magically solved. The confusion won't be completely gone. You won't suddenly understand the whole plot. But you might wake up with a little more peace, a little more trust, a little less need to control, because you'll remember that someone else is holding the pen. Someone who's been writing since before time began. Someone who knows how your story ends. Someone who's written every character, every plot twist, every chapter from beginning to end. And it's good. It's all good. Even the parts that don't feel good. Even the chapters that hurt. Even the plot twists that seem like mistakes. They're all part of a story that ends well. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the furnace, they didn't know they'd survive. They said, even if he doesn't rescue us, we're still not bowing. That's the faith that changes everything. Not the faith that demands deliverance, but the faith that trusts God's character, regardless of the outcome. Not the faith that says, I'll worship you if you give me what I want, but the faith that says, I'll worship you whether you give me what I want or not. Not the faith that's conditional on comfort, but the faith that's anchored in who God is, not what God does. Maybe you're in a furnace right now. Maybe you're in a lion's den. Maybe you're in Babylon watching everything you love burn, everything you built crumble, everything you planned dissolve. And you keep asking, where is God? Why is this happening? When will it end? But what if the question isn't where is God, but who is God? What if you could know, really know, deep in your soul, that He's good and He's sovereign and He's with you? Would that be enough? Even if the circumstances don't change, even if the fire keeps burning, even if the lions keep circling, would His presence be enough? Because sometimes the miracle isn't the fire going out. Sometimes the miracle is God walking through the fire with you. Sometimes the miracle isn't the lions disappearing. Sometimes the miracle is God shutting their mouths while you sleep peacefully in the den. Sometimes the miracle isn't circumstances changing. Sometimes the miracle is you changing in the midst of unchanged circumstances. Sometimes the miracle is peace that transcends understanding, joy that defies logic, hope that survives the worst chapters. Nebuchadnezzar lost his mind for 7 years because he needed to learn that he wasn't in control. Maybe you're losing your grip right now. Maybe the control you thought you had is slipping through your fingers. Maybe the plan is falling apart. Maybe the vision is crumbling. Maybe everything you thought you could control is revealing itself to be beyond your control, and you think it's all falling apart. You think it's a disaster. You think it's the end. But what if it's all falling into place? What if God is loosening your grip on things you were never meant to hold so He can place something better in your hands? What if He's dismantling the kingdom you built so He can build the kingdom He intended? What if He's removing what you were trusting in so you can learn to trust Him alone? Daniel influenced empires, but he never tried to control them. He advised kings, but he never bowed to them. He prospered in Babylon, but he never became Babylonian. And the secret was simple. He knew who he belonged to. He knew whose he was. They could change his circumstances, but they couldn't change his identity. They could change his location, but they couldn't change his allegiance. They could change his title, but they couldn't change his trust. What have the voices of this world called you? What names have circumstances tried to give you? Failure, disappointment, too much, not enough, too broken, too late, past your prime, disqualified, damaged, second choice, backup plan, forgotten, worthless. But those aren't your names. Those names are lies. Your name is greatly loved. Your name is chosen. Your name is held. Your name is written in a story you don't control, but you can trust. Your name is known by the God who knows the end from the beginning. Before you sleep tonight, I want you to try something. If you have the strength, write down the names you've been wearing, the labels that have been stuck to you, the identities that circumstances or people or your own shame have given you, all the lies you've been believing about who you are. Write them down on paper or type them in your phone. Just get them out. And then speak your real name, the one God gave you, before you were born, before you made any mistakes, before anything happened to you. Beloved, chosen, redeemed, held, called, purposed, known, seen, treasured, greatly loved. Not because you've earned it, not because you deserve it, but because He decided it, because He authored it, because He wrote your name in His book before the foundation of the world. You're not the author of your story. And thank God for that, because if you were the author, you'd still be stuck in chapter 3, rewriting the same painful scenes over and over, trying to make them make sense, trying to give them a different ending, trying to figure out how you could have done it differently. You'd be trapped in revision mode, eternally editing, never moving forward, never able to let go of what happened and trust what's coming. The main character of your life isn't you. It's the one who sees the whole manuscript while you're still squinting at a single page, confused by the plot twists, unable to see how this chapter connects to the next, wondering if there's even a theme or if it's all just random chaos. But it's not random. There's a theme. There's a through line. There's a plot that makes sense when you see it from beginning to end. You just can't see it yet because you're still in the middle. And here's the relief you've been looking for, the relief you came here hoping to find, the relief of realizing you were never supposed to control this. The pressure is off. The burden is lifted. The weight you've been carrying, the weight of trying to hold your whole life together, trying to make everything work out, trying to control outcomes you can't control, you can set it down. You don't have to carry it anymore. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to see the whole plan. You don't have to understand why this chapter is so painful or confusing or long. You just have to do what Daniel did. Stay faithful in the small things, the vegetable choices, the prayer routines, the daily decisions that nobody sees. Pray even when you can't see the answer. Pray facing Jerusalem even when Jerusalem is destroyed. Pray even when it becomes illegal. Pray even when nothing seems to change. Choose obedience even when no one's watching. Refuse to bow to what everyone else is bowing to. Refuse to compromise your convictions even when compromise seems wise. Refuse to worship what everyone else is worshiping even when the cost is high. And trust that the author who started your story is faithful to finish it. Trust that he's writing even when you can't see the words appearing. Trust that he's moving even when everything feels stuck. Trust that he's working even when you can't see any evidence. And trust that his endings are always better than ours. Always. Because he sees what we can't see. He knows what we don't know. He holds what we can't hold. Daniel saw empires. You're seeing one day at a time. Daniel saw centuries. You're seeing the next hour. And that's okay. That's exactly how it should be. Because the God who showed Daniel the big picture is the same God holding your small moment. And he's just as present, just as powerful, just as purposeful in your Tuesday afternoon as he was in Daniel's prophetic visions. He's just as invested in your ordinary day as he was in the rise and fall of Babylon. So close your eyes now. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Relax your hands. Open your fists. Let go of what you're trying to hold. You don't have to hold everything together tonight. You don't have to solve everything. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to see the path forward. You don't have to know what's next. Just rest. Just breathe. Just know that while you sleep, God is working. While you rest, He's writing. While you let go, He's holding on. And when you wake up tomorrow, the story will still be His. The authorship will still be secure. The ending will still be good. And that's the best news you could ever receive. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift even slightly, even just for a moment, would you let me know? Or say what you're learning to let go of, or say what you're learning to trust God with. I read every single one, and it genuinely encourages me to keep creating these. It reminds me that I'm not alone in this work, that God is using these words to reach people in their hardest moments, in their darkest nights, in their most desperate hours. If you want more nights like this, more scripture for sleep, more reminders that you're held even when everything feels out of control, subscribe, not as an obligation, not because you owe me anything, but as a way of saying yes, I want to keep remembering whose story I'm in. Yes, I want to keep learning to trust the author. Yes, I want to keep encountering God's word in ways that bring peace to my restless nights. You're not broken. You've just been trying to author a story that was never yours to write. You're not failing. You're just finally learning to trust the one who's been writing all along. You're not lost. You're just in a chapter that doesn't make sense yet. But it will. One day it will. When the book is opened, when the seals are broken, when you see the whole thing from beginning to end, from first page to last, you'll understand why every confusing page, every painful chapter, every plot twist that felt like a mistake was actually essential, was actually necessary, was actually the only way to get you where God was taking you. Daniel lived in exile for 70 years and never went home to Jerusalem. But he's home now. He's standing in his allotted place at the end of days. He's hearing, "Well done, good and faithful servant." He's seeing that every prayer he prayed facing Jerusalem was heard. Every moment of faithfulness mattered. Every small act of obedience counted. And he's understanding that the story was never about going back to Jerusalem. It was about bringing Jerusalem with him wherever he went. It was about being faithful in Babylon while refusing to become Babylonian. It was about staying tethered to his true identity no matter how many times they tried to rename him. And that's your calling too. Not to escape Babylon, but to be faithful in Babylon. Not to avoid the furnace, but to know God's with you in the furnace. Not to outrun the lions, but to sleep peacefully while they circle because you know who shut their mouths. Not to control your circumstances, but to trust the one who controls all circumstances. You're not waiting to get back to the life you had. You're discovering that God is writing something better than what you lost. So rest tonight, knowing this. The author who numbered the hairs on your head, who knows the number of your days, who planned your steps before you took your first breath, who wrote your name in his book before the foundation of the world, before the first star was spoken into existence, that author is writing your story tonight. Right now, in this moment, while you're listening to these words, he's writing. And he doesn't need your help. He doesn't need your control. He doesn't need your anxiety. He doesn't need your attempts to figure it out or force it or fix it. He just needs your trust. And maybe tonight, maybe right now, you can give him that. Not because you understand, not because you can see the next chapter, not because you know how it works out, but because you've heard Daniel's story. And you've realized that the best stories aren't written by people trying to control their own narratives. The best stories are written by the author who sees the end from the beginning, who sees your whole life from start to finish, who knows exactly where this is going. And he says it's good. He says it's worth it. He says, trust me. Close your eyes now. Breathe deeply. Let everything go. Every worry, every plan, every attempt to control, every fear about the future, every regret about the past. Let it all go. The God who held Daniel in Babylon is holding you right now. The God who walked in the furnace with 3 young men is walking through your fire. The God who shut the lions' mouths is silencing whatever is trying to devour your peace tonight. And the God who revealed mysteries to a teenage exile is revealing this truth to you right now. You are greatly loved. You are held, and your story is safe in the hands of the one who's been writing it all along. Rest now. Sleep well. Let your mind be still. Let your heart be quiet. And know that when you wake, the story continues. Not because you're in control, but because he is. And that, my friend, that makes all the difference. That changes everything. That's the truth that sets you free. You are not the author of your story, and that is not your failure. That is your freedom. Good night. Sleep well. And may you wake knowing more deeply than ever before that you are held by the author who never stops writing, never stops loving, and never, ever lets go.